A life as a PhD student in Australia. What does it look like? In this English lesson, this English listening lesson, we will hear from Pete from Aussie English, where he will speak to us in English about living in Australia, about completing his PhD in Australia, so that we can listen, learn, and improve our spoken English. Watch the whole video lesson and listen carefully to the words, phrases, and expressions Pete uses to express himself in English, talking about his life as a PhD student in Australia. At the end of this video lesson, together we will learn 5 interesting idioms and expressions which came up throughout this natural conversation. Friends, before we begin this video lesson, I would love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments below this video, would you like to study in Australia? And if so, what? What would you study? Where would you study? Tell us in the comments below this video. Friends, this video lesson is proudly brought to you thanks to Using English TP members. Have you not heard of Using English TP? The Using English TP Classroom is a virtual online classroom and community connecting English learners from around the world to speak in English. Through weekly lesson sets, Using English TP members are drastically improving their spoken English by learning grammar, vocabulary, idioms, and expressions naturally, just as native English speakers do. Most importantly, they are connecting. They are speaking in group calls, and together we are improving our spoken English with real people. Head over to usingenglishTP.com, enroll, become a member today, and start speaking with us in our virtual classroom. Okay, back on topic, and let's hear from Pete, and let's hear about his experience, his life as a PhD student in Australia.
Can you tell us a little bit about doing your PhD? What's it like? Because you're doing your PhD, or you've done it.
I've almost finished. I have to hand it in completed with reviews by the end of the month, and then it's done and I can never have to study again. So I guess most people will probably know about the US version of the PhD. At least that's the one that I knew about before I started. And they have a PhD which goes for about 6 or 7 years, and you have to work at the same time in order to be paid money to live. You get a stipend or whatever. But in Australia, our PhDs run for only 3.5 to 4 years normally. They can go longer, but you'll get what's called an APA. I've forgotten the exact words, but it's effectively an Australian scholarship from the government if you're an Australian student to study. And so it's about $25,000 a year. So it's normally enough to sort of live off, but you tend to have to be able to qualify to get some kind of scholarship or show that you can support yourself whilst you're studying, because it's full time. So you're going to do like 8 hours a day. But yeah, it was a pretty good experience. It just, for me personally, I don't think I would go back and do it again, but because now I want to do, Aussie English and go off on that tangent, which has nothing to do with my study, but it was a good experience. Overall, it's definitely worth doing if you're overseas and you want to smash out a PhD quicker than if you went to America and have it effectively be the same. It is exactly the same credential overseas. Then yeah, definitely come to Australia and try and hook one up.
When you said you started off, you made an interesting expression, or you did this like, so with a shotgun to your head. It sounds like it was hard. How did you stay motivated throughout your studies? Like, it's still
having other hobbies,
having a life while you're doing your PhD. It must be like, okay, we're both English teachers, so we talk about motivation when learning English, but still doing the same research paper for 4 years. What got you through? Like, how did you finish it now?
That's the battle. I think that's the battle. You've got to keep finding ways to, like with learning English, keep diving back into it, finding different ways to re-engage with the material, to find your passion again. And it was definitely like that for me, where the first year I worked my ass off. I did like, 10 hours a day. I was really into it. I did lots of lab work. I smashed out probably about 2 years worth of work in the first year. But then the next 3 years, it sort of went down into a slump where I did little bits and pieces each, I got everything done, but it could have gone a lot faster than it really did if I'd been able to better motivate myself. And so I guess that's part of it. You have to realize that it's going to be really good at first, like anything, and then it becomes normal, and it gets a bit like a day job, it's just a very drudgy kind of, you're constantly doing the same old stuff. And then especially when it gets to writing, you kind of want to kill yourself because it's just the same thing again and again. You're just tweaking it, changing it up. And so, yeah, it was definitely keeping my eye on the prize and being like, I just need to finish this, get it done. And that's what kept me going, every day, step by step, just keep aiming at the finish line.
Interesting. So me and my husband, we were in Australia a few months back, and I'd studied at La Trobe University. And I've always told my husband, so this was the first time he had gone to Australia, we'd visited. I said, Melbourne is a very multicultural city. And when we'd gone on campus at La Trobe, he was shocked. He was walking around, he's like, where are there so many foreigners here? Because in Croatia, there, especially at universities, you can find foreigners. But I always tell a lot of students out there looking to study abroad that I remember when I was doing my master's, there were only 3 domestic students, so Australians in the master's program, and the rest were international students. Did you have a similar experience, or?
There were a few. I think my area was zoology and biology, and so I don't think there were as many foreigners interested in that. There were definitely foreigners here. They would tend to be Europeans though, or say Americans or British people that would come over. But I think there are definitely other areas like doing a master's in business or a master's in IT or some kind of post-grad, even graduate degrees in those fields like engineering and everything. They tend to attract, at least at Melbourne Uni, lots of Asian people. So you'll get lots of Chinese, lots of Japanese, lots of Indonesians coming over. And just they seem to love those areas of university and getting those degrees. I assume that they're just quick. You can smash out, a 2-year master's and then start making a pretty good income from that when you go home. Whereas zoology is a bit more, I think you just have to be passionate about animals. And so it's a lot less encouraged by foreign families who are spending loads of money to send their kids to Australia and expect them to come back as, really well-educated, speaking English well, doctors, lawyers, all that sort of stuff.
Somebody who finishes zoology, excuse my ignorance, but completing a PhD in zoology, what opportunities do you have once you get your PhD?
Teaching English.
Okay, fantastic.
No, well, it's open-ended. I think it's kind of, you got to look at it like learning a language, right? When you learn English, you're learning English, but you're not only learning English, you're learning how to learn a language, which can then apply to anything and everything else that requires learning. So you now have the skills to sit down and learn any language in the world, probably to teach people how to learn a language, probably how to sit down and learn anything else, go through the steps of learning how to skateboard or something, how to learn. So with learning zoology, or at least studying zoology, people are always like, what, are you going to work in a zoo now? And it's like, well, that's an option, but it's not the end all and be all of a zoology degree. It's more that I have learned how to be a scientist, and I could, potentially, if I wanted to, go into any area related to science. If it was really distant, I would have to start, from the bottom again and re-educate myself. But with zoology, it's anything related to animals. So I could work for the government, I could work for environment, I could work for mining companies, going out and surveying the land. I could work in research. I could work at the museum where I was working, at universities, at the zoo. There's just any job related to science or related to animals. There's sort of, indirect ways. It'd be very rare for it to be ever related 100% with my topic that I did in my PhD, but it would most likely be related to science. And so I could be like, I'll just have to read a bit, and now I know how to do this thing with the knowledge I learnt whilst doing the PhD.
Ah, in a previous episode, we had Jackie from Ask Jackie, and she mentioned something about being adaptable and being able to adapt yourself using the skills when you're applying for a new job or for just anything you do in life. This sounds very similar to what she said. Would you say that maybe those skills that you learned as part of your PhD and your studies, you're able to that's just enough? You're like, your learning stops there, or do you have, it sounds like you have to keep developing, or
you have to I think that's the same for any job these days though, right? Like you can't stagnate. You can't learn how to replace, the tire of a car and be like, well, I'll do this for the rest of my life, whereas like back in the day, you learn how to put a wagon wheel on a wagon and that was it for your entire life, or to how to plow a field. But today it's like, every 5 years, you have to effectively completely change your career. And it's getting quicker and quicker and quicker, those intervals between having to retrain yourself. And so I think, the PhD is definitely like that, where you just have to be open to constantly learning, constantly changing, and being like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I've got hired, but they're working on fish, or maybe they're working on humans in some weird medical thing. And I'm like, all right, well, I have to just work out what the basic science is there behind that, read a bit. And then it's like, all right, I can do this. So I think like with learning languages or anything else in life, once you get the skill and learn how to learn and know yourself a bit, you can apply that to different things. But I think, like any job today, you have to be open to being able to adapt and change for sure.
One thing also, I know when I was studying that Australia is very great. I love Australia for this, the opportunity of working while I was studying, but also going back to that last question, I've worked in security, I've made coffees, I've worked at Safeway, and now I'm teaching English, I've worked at a chiropractic clinic. I feel, and I'm only 28, and a lot of people in Europe are like, how have you done so much in your life? Like, we start working, I think, if I'm not mistaken, is it still 16 and 9 months, the legal age, working age?
14 and 9 months for me in Melbourne. 14 and 9 months, I believe it is. But it's just that anyone will hire us for anything.
Okay, don't put it like that. We're very skilled people. But, okay, do you think, like, how many professions have you had in your lifetime?
Far out. So I worked as a pizza maker and sort of like in restaurants. I've worked as a waiter. I've worked in factories doing preparing food for like Safeway, which is a common supermarket chain in Australia. So like packaging food. I've worked in gyms. I've done all sorts of stuff. But it would tend to be that people would just say, hey, there's this job. And a lot of the time with labor, it's labor related. So you don't really need to be skilled. That they will just be like, you'll learn how to do it on the job. It's fine. We just need someone to learn how to do this, simple packaging task.
So if somebody is traveling to Australia to do their PhD, do you think the chances, I'm not in Australia at the moment, so it'd be unfair for me to comment and say, the work situation is good or bad. Do you think it's easy for somebody, maybe if they do get some sort of scholarship or stipend or some sort of financial backing, will they be able to, first of all, find and have time for a part-time or casual job?
I think it'll be more of a time management thing than you won't be given a job. So there'll be jobs up the wazoo for you to find. You just have to, be willing to do certain jobs. So like working in a cafe, if your English isn't up to scratch, like if you're not advanced enough to be teaching a class in English or something like that yet, you might have to do those kinds of jobs. But I definitely think they're there. You just have to apply for them. I've got plenty of friends who are here from overseas, and within 3 months they've had no English, then they've gotten a job in a cafe or something, and you get, 16, 19, 20 plus dollars an hour, which is more than enough to live off maybe 20 hours a week. But I think it'd be more a time management thing of how much time can you actually spend not doing your PhD. So a lot of the time the government will probably be like, you need to at least have a certain amount of money when you come over here to support yourself, or you have to have a scholarship so that you don't have to work. So they would probably, at least with a PhD, be trying to encourage you not to work, although those opportunities are definitely there. And through doing your PhD, you'll probably be thrown work. People will be like, do you want to do this thing for a few $100, or do you want to do this or teach this, or there'll be opportunities everywhere.
Friends, if you struggle to follow the conversation between Pete and myself, watch the video lesson again, but this time turn on subtitles and try to listen and read at the same time so that you can better follow, so that you can better understand the natural conversation. Let's move on and let's learn 5 interesting expressions, 5 interesting idioms which came up throughout our natural conversation. The first idiom which came up was to go off on a tangent. If someone goes off on a tangent, it means that they go off, they behave in a completely different way than they did before. Or they do something completely differently from what they did before. An example of this in a sentence could be, I suppose I was trying to conform, but then I went off on a tangent and I moved to London to study drama. Friends, here the idiom to go off on a tangent was being used because I started behaving differently. Previously, I'd never shown an interest in drama, but I'd gone off on a tangent. So I'd behaved completely differently, I got off on a tangent and I went to study drama. Pete used an interesting expression, a common urban slang used in Australia throughout our natural conversation. You may have come across this on TV or in TV shows, and the expression is to smash something out. Friends, if you smash something out, it means that you do something really quickly. This is an informal expression you can use when having a conversation with friends. In the conversation, Pete said, I smashed out a lot of work in a year. Here what he is saying, what he's expressing is that he did a lot of work very fast in 1 year. The third idiom which came up in the conversation was to keep the eye on the prize. Friends, we use this idiom if you would like to express that you want to stay focused. You want to stay focused on the end result. For example, Pete kept his eye on the prize and handed in his thesis last year. The fourth idiom which came up in the natural conversation was to have something up the wazoo. We use this idiom if we would like to express that we have a great amount, we have abundance of something. For example, Mary called me up last night and asked me if I wanted to go out with her. I had to decline and I told her, sorry, I have homework up the wazoo. Again, friends, this is an informal idiom you can use when speaking among friends. The fifth and final idiom which came up was not up to scratch. If something is not up to scratch, it means that it's not acceptable. It's not good and it's not satisfactory. It's not up to a particular standard. For example, your papers have been very good up until now, but frankly, this one's not up to scratch. Here the idiom not up to scratch is being used because it's not satisfactory, it's not good enough, it's not up to the standards. There you have it, 5 idioms you can use to better express yourself when speaking in English. Remember to check out Pete's channel over at Aussie English. Continue practicing and improving your English with us in the Using English TP classroom. Go to usingenglishTP.com, enroll, become a member, and join our private classroom and community to drastically improve your spoken English. See you there.